the operative image of God that most Catholics, I'll just pick on Catholics, that one I'm allowed to do, I guess. The operative image they have is largely pagan. I know that's a little rude and disrespectful. And there's nothing wrong with pagans, by the way. I've met some very nice pagans who who are much more loving than a lot of Catholics I know. What I mean by that, and you've all heard it on television 100 times, when the comedian will put his finger upward and say, "the man upstairs." Do you realize that's pure paganism? The man, first of all, he's male, and he's a critical observer from upstairs. He's distant. And this isn't much of a stretch, brothers and sisters. In fact, it's not a stretch at all. He's making a list, checking it twice, going to find out who's naughty or nice. Does that sound like anything close to home? Of course it does. Of course it does. Santa Claus is just it's just our image of God. And the North Pole became the heavens, I guess. We went up there. And he has a white beard and he's male. It just all works. It all works. But but the point I really want to make, he's a critical observer. Big C, big O. Critical observer. Making a list, checking it twice. He's not involved in the deal. He's not love. This isn't love. This is judgment. And that's why we're losing the fight all over people. Their intuition is caught up with them, and they say, "This is the God I don't believe in." Now, they don't formulate it the way I'm trying to formulate it now, and I'm not being an unbeliever. You got a believer sitting here. Don't have any doubt about that. But stay with me. And the law of two, as my colleague in the Living School, Cynthia Bourgeau, says in her book on the Trinity, much smarter than mine. She says she's more a philosopher and a metaphysician. She says the law of two is inherently antagonistic, argumentative, either or. This is what I call in my books dualistic thinking. It's what all religions at the mystical levels overcome, because dualistic thinking, I say this as strongly as I cannot get you there, all right? In fact, it will stymie you early on. Here it is in a word. And I even checked this out with Dr. Oz, if you want to be impressed. Got to stay at his house for a few days. We talked later in the night, and this was years ago, and before he got into diets. But we were talking about theological things, and he's a Swedenborgian, has a very real faith himself. But I said, "Is it true, doctor, that the mind is a binary system?" He said, "Absolutely. It understands things originally when a little 3-year-old, 4-year-old hears a new word, short, tall. The only way I can understand short is in contradistinction to tall. And many people never go beyond that. They create everything in terms of two, black, white, gay, straight, Catholic, Protestant, male, female, Republican, Democrat. It goes on and on. And then, here's how stupid it gets. You think because you identify with one side, you're smart. We've just gone through 15 months of this, yeah. A country filled with universities and churches and educated people, and most, apart from a bush burning in your life, like the bush that burned before Moses, everybody stays at that early infantile level of thinking. It's called dualistic thinking. The Eastern religions, we got to be honest here, were much better. Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, at understanding that mystical thinking is not the law of two, but as Cynthia says, the law of three. Hegel, of course, Gurdjieff, they both say the same thing. That once you get into three, you get into thesis, antithesis, synthesis, flow, change, movement. It's not an inert God, it's an active God, it's an engaged God. By the middle of the book, I start capitalizing the word flow, if you've read it. It's as good a word for the Holy Spirit as I can imagine. And if you think I'm a heretic, those of you raised with the Scriptures, I want you to look up every single metaphor for the Holy Spirit. It's always a descending dove, a flowing stream, blowing wind, descending fire. It's always movement. God is this energetic, dynamic movement that keeps people greening.